how much care, how much money, how efficient they are, and how much they're driven just to stay in business. They're willing to pivot. They're willing to do anything they can.
1, 2, 3.
Coming up on episode 346 of The Modern Acre, we're talking to Jason Giannelli, a fourth-generation farmer in Kern County, California. We're talking farming, we're talking water, talking all the things.
The Modern Acre podcast explores the latest in business, investing, technology, and sustainability in agriculture, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Ness. If you'd like to dig deeper with The Modern Acre, be sure to check out our membership community, The Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by Pinion. The economics of farming are increasingly difficult, and many producers are asking Pinion, the leading food and ag business advisory firm, questions around thin margins and cash flow. Farmers want to know how to calculate the total cost of running the business and determine their farm's true break-even. The answer is twofold. First, calculating beyond the field is critical. Second, ensure you know your true costs. If you're struggling with this, Pinion advisors can perform financial calculations that identify places to cut expenses and ways to optimize your farm business. Learn more at pinionglobal.com or hit the link in our show notes. Tim, I'm super excited for this conversation. We love talking to farmers. I think it's super important. It's something that's neglected in the industry, especially around people that are building things in and around agriculture. I think of ag tech. I think of, regenerative agriculture, where a lot of these people that are, want to see innovation happening in agriculture, but they're not often, in many cases, not listening to farmers. And we've made it a priority over the years to make sure we're talking to farmers. And it was awesome chatting with Jason, who's a farmer on the ground, managing tons of farms, row crops, dairy, and learning how he's thinking about the business, how he's thinking about water management with SGMA in California, and thinking about regenerative agriculture. He had some strong opinions, Tim, about regenerative agriculture and about water and SGMA. And I think it's important, while we may not agree with everything, right? Like, it's important to listen and learn what the realities of farmers are on the ground. And I think it would behoove, everyone across the industry to do more listening directly to farmers. So I'm glad we got to do that.
Yeah, it was super fun talking to Jason. He is a machine on LinkedIn if you don't follow him, but every day he's showing you what he's up to. So I love seeing farmers that are that transparent and open about what they're working on. He's really involved in the policy and water side of the agriculture business, which is awesome. But the company that he works for, Old River Farming Company and R&G Fanucci, specialize in almonds, pistachios, table grapes, vegetables, commodity crops for a lot of big dairies in Kern County. So just a really big operator spanning a number of different crops, which is just cool to see the context.
So with that, we hope you guys enjoy this conversation with Jason. We'll start with what's top of mind for him right now.
Right now, top of mind, policy-wise, is always water. Dealing with SGMA, just trying to be involved as much as I can and give different perspectives on that. And at the same time is doing my day-to-day job, which is growing crops. So trying to be everywhere.
The life of a farmer, you have to be executing your crop. If you take your eye off the ball for one day, it can have massive repercussions. But you also have to zoom out and think about, where is the farm going? Where is the industry going? Where is agriculture going as it relates to water and energy? So this is the job of a farmer that I think a lot of people don't see, is you have to be on the ground, day-to-day execution, but you also have to be being strategic and thinking long-term. So I'm excited to dig into how you actually do that. But Jason, let's learn a little bit more about you. Who are you, and kind of what ultimately got you involved in agriculture?
So my family has been farming in Kern for 4 generations. My dad and my uncle still farm to this day. They farm cotton, corn, alfalfa, all bunch of row crops, and then a little bit of almonds. My background is, after college, I just started working for various companies, and now I've landed with a larger family farm. I oversee the whole farming operation along with my boss, and we farm in Kern and Kings County. Basically, what we do is we oversee all the farming operations for dairies, and my boss's family is a 5th generation also. and we have great people that work for us and everything. So we farm for all the dairies and we do all the row crops for dairies. And that's basically like 99% of what we do, and dealing with all the water, doing just everything all the way across the board. So that's basically what we do. And we grow wheat, corn, alfalfa, milo, Sudan grass. And then on other ground that we have, that's our own, we have where we don't use dairy water or anything like that. We grow carrots and we grow processing tomatoes as well.
Yeah, I think we originally connected on LinkedIn. You post really interesting videos of everything your day-to-day looks like, where seems like you're constantly in your truck. You're in your truck now as we do this interview, and really cool to see everything that you have going on. And I think what is unique is the area that you farm in down in Kern County. Like when I drive through there, I'm thinking citrus and tree nuts, and you've kind of like taken a different approach where you're more in the row crop space and a little bit of a contrarian view there. So maybe like talk to us about kind of like why you've kind of focused on the row crop space when all of your neighbors seemingly have gone into the permanent crops.
I don't usually follow the trends. That's probably one of the things. So, I mean, I try to look at, almonds have been successful, the tree crops. Everybody's got a niche, right? Everybody is good at what they do. I felt like I was better serving the row crop side because nobody else was wanting to get into row crops. Everybody was wanting to stay in tree crops. So, and that's what I grew up doing. Cotton is still my favorite crop to grow. I felt like I showed more value doing that and just trying to be the best farmer I can be in that area. And along with dealing with the dairy water and dealing with all that and trying to keeping everything in balance and regulations and everything like that. I mean, that's basically what we do. And my boss is just like I am. We basically take shit and we make it good, to be frank. So that's what we do.
Yeah, so I want to dig into, your approach. Farming row crops, California, a lot of challenges, headwinds. I mean, how do you think about continuing to grow the business, make the business profitable? Where are you kind of focusing your time and attention on as it relates to the business?
So trying to find new avenues, not just in Kern County, but how can we expand our horizons to be productive in other counties as well? And by saying that is like, how do I best represent the dairies I represent? So how do I show more value? And what I want to do is farm as much ground as possible in California and maybe a little bit and do more dry matter away from the dairies to bring in more feed that way. Because, everything's getting smaller, right? I mean, everything's with SGMA and everything else, we're all going to be impacted somehow. So how can we show value is going out and finding different areas that we can go farm and be more of a value. So our dairies that we represent, which are family ran dairies, every one of them are family ran dairies operations. How can we best keep bringing them feed as our water situation becomes dwindling?
Yes, let's dig into SGMA a little bit. Like we've talked about it on the podcast here and there. It's the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. It's been introduced in California. There's this phase-in period. You're obviously actively involved in this, but maybe kind of give us an overview. So what SGMA is, where we're at currently, where it's going, and how it's really going to impact farm production in the South Central Valley. So
basically what SGMA is going to do is curtail everyone's groundwater pumping. So because based on what they're thinking that because of groundwater pumping is that we have subsidence, we have all these areas sinking and everything else. And now the state's saying that all these GSAs have to get together and all these plans, and you have a 20-year sustainability plan. So you have 20 years to become sustainable. And if your plan isn't working, and they'll do checkups every 5 years, I believe. So every 5 years, if you're not being sustainable with your plan or your plan's not making sense, the state will give you an option to come up with another plan, or they'll end up taking you over. And if the state starts taking you over, then you're coming in. It's a different process at that point.
Jason, dig into how do you define and how do you develop your plan? Is this just about using less water in general so that you're not using up the groundwater reserves? Can you talk us through what does this look like? Is it just over the next several years you're working to use less water on more ground?
Not so much less water on more ground, but we're going to have to fallow ground and use that water. Our ground that's not as productive, we'll probably end up having to move that water source over to our more productive ground. So that's basically what's going to end up happening. And then also Sigma from the beginning wasn't supposed to pick winners and losers, but it's going to pick winners and losers.
What do you mean by that?
So if you have surface water and you have water rights, you're in a better position than if you're not in an area that has that doesn't have. So if you're in an area that doesn't get contract water, or you're only getting your surface water during wet periods, you're in a different boat. And that's the problem with a lot of these plans, these GSAs, is everybody, whether you're on one end of the county, or it doesn't matter if you're in Merced, doesn't matter if you're in Tulare, doesn't matter wherever, if you're on one end of the county or the other, you have different you have different water rights, different surface rights, depending on where your water comes from. So that's going to impact everybody. And that's going to impact other economies. That's going to impact taxes. I mean, the tax revenue that's going to be lost through Sigma is going to be, it's going to impact the whole valley, basically, San Joaquin Valley.
And is that because ultimately is what you're getting at, that the losers, or the people that maybe don't have as good of water rights or water situations, more land is going to be fallowed and production overall is going to go down, and that's going to lead to reduced tax revenue for the state? Is that what you mean?
Yes. And so the crews won't work as long. You won't have as much. Everybody's impacted. So you only have so many people that can fit in the bubble, right? Once you start dwindling that bubble, more people are going to have to leave that bubble. So, and that tax revenue is going to go somewhere. There's not going to be as many jobs. And the other misconception too is that it doesn't just affect the small guy, it affects the big guys too, because the big guys rely on the small guys. We send pistachios to Wonderful. We send almonds, to Wonderful. It's like, and that's how they keep their year supply, is through people like us, is through the smaller guy, because that's the only way, because they don't have enough ground of their own to be able to keep a year supply of nuts, or even the carrot companies, like that's how they do. That's how they're able to keep a year supply of carrots, is through outside growers. And that's what we do.
How quickly do you think this is going to happen? Like, if farmers are going to be forced to have to make that decision, that trade-off of like, we're going to have to fallow this field because Sigma is reducing how much water we can use. Is that happening now, or is this going to happen in 5 years, 10 years out? Like, what is
it's already happening now. So, and I think a lot of the basins, I mean, it's going to be controversial to say, but I think a lot of farmers either left their head in the sand, not thinking this was going to happen, or their GSAs weren't upfront with them about things. They weren't paying attention, so they weren't getting notices about what's going to happen. So everything's happening right now. That's why you're seeing almonds being pulled out. That's why you're seeing solar going in. And that's why you're seeing all these things happening, is trying to find different revenue sources. And at the same time, it's like, where does it all end though? Because there's only enough capacity for only so much solar. I mean, PG&E is not going to start doing any more subsidies. I mean, the solar subsidies are going to start going away, because PG&E can't afford to pay those taxes anymore. And so where does it all end? What's going to be the next thing for our ground? Because we're in it to farm. We're not in it to be solar panels or anything like that. And people and other people are thinking that, oh, maybe we could become a water bank. I mean, that's going to be out of the question too, because the other thing is you're getting into a whole different animal of. The other thing with Sigma is, like, everyone wants to talk about water banking, which is great, but here's the thing I tell people all the time. It's like, what's the last, since year 2000, that was the last year we got our full allocation of surface water, 100% of our surface water, until last year. So that's one of the things that's changed. The government created the problem, and then government created Sigma. That's why we have an overdraft problem, because we haven't received full surface allocations either. And we have a government that says, oh, this Sigma is going to make everybody equal, and we're not equal, because we have different land structures, different soil types, different everything. So if you're looking at water banking, you're not guaranteed anything, because you don't even know what your plan's going to tell you. And so if your MT levels are set way too high, you're not guaranteed to pump out any water. So if you put in, like, let's say you put in 300 acre feet of water or something like that, just throw out a number. Well, you don't know where your MT levels are set, one, from your plans quite yet, because not all the plans are approved. And if your MT levels are set way too high and you get to that threshold, you're not guaranteed. They'll tell you, like, you can't pump anymore. Well, I banked this much water. I have a right to that. No, you don't. Because one, you had to go through the permitting process of the water district. And then the other thing too is, if you didn't have a permit, then all the water under the ground becomes part of the public trust. State of California passed that 20 years ago, I believe, because everybody has a right to water.
No, that's all super interesting information, and want to switch gears here a little bit just to kind of like the farm management side. Like there's a lot happening in terms of like sustainable agriculture, whether that's regenerative or climate smart principles that are being heavily focused on now. A lot of biologicals coming to the marketplace, ag tech. As a farmer, you get kind of like a lot of inbound of interest on you should do this, you should do this. Like how do you approach that as a farmer? I'm sure you have a lot of people knocking on your door. You farm on a lot of acres. How do you kind of go through the decision making process on kind of like what farm management practices to implement or what ag tech to explore?
So, I mean, I work with Western growers and their technology side of things, and that's basically where I've picked up a lot of my stuff is through the Western Growers Center of Technology and Science. I usually do panels with them and talk to like startups or what's new or what's not new or what can work for us and what can't. So doing that, but also it's all good out there. But like, yeah, no, you're always trying to, okay, is this really going to work for me? And if they'll trial it first, like we use microbes on our dairy stuff where we don't use synthetic fertilizers. We use more microbes and everything, and we've seen better crops. But at the same time, it's like we still run tillage. You're never going to get away from tillage. I don't feel that. I feel like we'll never get away because that's the only way you can really truly air out the soil. And regenerative, I mean, if it works for people, it's great. I mean, I mean, everybody has their own plan. Each farm is different. Every farmer is different. I don't tell people how to farm, but I think if there's more tools in the toolbox, great. If it works for them, great. If it doesn't, don't. I had someone tell me one time that my practices are too old. I had a microbial guy or something. I don't know. I had someone like that tell me that because I run tillage and I do certain things, and and he told me my practices are old school, and I was flabbergasted by that. As a farmer, you don't like being told how to farm, obviously, especially when someone doesn't understand your soil types or what you actually do.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think that whether it's ag tech, whether it's, sustainable regenerative agriculture, I think a lot of people that have desire to grow those areas need to have probably more empathy of farmers and defer to farmers more than is happening, because a lot of ag tech, a lot of regenerative ag is really pushed. Like, you should do this without really understanding, being on the ground, talking to farmers and seeing the realities of the choices that they have to make every day.
Look at the colleges now. They're pushing regenerative so much, like all these ag schools, and pushing this or doing no-till and everything else. I mean, no-till works for some people and it doesn't work for others. It all depends on your soil. I feel like it depends on your soil types, and everything. So I always tell people nothing, like we plant all of our corn on the flat, right? But we still run a cultivator with flat sweeps through there, even though it's Roundup ready. But when you open up that ground, that soil, that top 2 inches, just to break up that crust, the air that goes in there and those roots, they just expand so quickly, It's better than any, then you put water right behind it. It just gives it that breath of fresh air it needed. But like when you see these kids coming out of college or this newer generation coming out of college now, and they think they're smart about regen. I'm like, yeah, but not every farm's the same. And I get it. Not a lot of them come from an ag background, but they just went to college to become ag, which is fine. But a lot of them just see what's in front of them. They don't look at the bigger picture and how to pivot from things, because not everything's done by a book. I always tell everybody in farming, anybody who wants to be a farmer, I'm like, you're pivoting every day. It doesn't, you can have a plan, but I get a ton of phone calls because something breaks down or something happens. And if my guys don't know which way to go, then they'll call me and we're always pivoting. There's always, you still have to get the job done.
Totally. I think for our farm, it's just insane the amount of decisions that are happening on a daily basis for each field, each crop, just thousands of decisions on a daily basis to get through the growing season. So it's a lot to manage when you're boots on the ground actually executing those crops.
I tell people I'm a banker, I'm a water engineer, I'm a agronomist, I'm a PCA, I'm a mechanic, I'm a tech. I wear every hat. Do I know everything? No, but if I don't know it, I try to figure it out. And that's what you have to do nowadays to be able to be productive and get things done, because farming is not an 8 to 5 job, but I love it. So.
Well, Jason, I wanted to chat about the dairy industry with you a little bit. You obviously work with a lot of big dairies. A lot of the videos I see, you're driving by lagoons and the methane emissions. Can you just kind of like talk through kind of the dairy industry, the current state? I think there's a lot of kind of narratives about like consolidation within dairies. Dairies are going out of business. Yet when you look at like USDA like numbers, it's like the number one commodity in California is dairy. So maybe just give us kind of the lay of the land and kind of like the different practices that you do with the methane digestion and everything that's involved there.
Yeah, so a lot of the dairies we deal with, we have the methane digesters, and dairies are the most efficient, I would say probably the most efficiently ran operations you'll ever see. Nothing goes to waste on a dairy, because when it comes to methane, we have with the methane digesters, you're either putting methane back into the natural gas lines, and selling it back to SoCal Gas, or you have your own power plant too that can generate power for part of the dairy, So you have these important things that are going on. And also you're taking out the bedding and cleaning up the bedding and spreading it out and then putting it back in, always processing different things. And also you got compost. They make their own compost and it's all registered and it's sold to different areas. So it's and going all the way back to the water, the water gets used on all of our crops that we use to feed the cows, that we grow with, and it gets blended. So it's probably one of the most efficiently ran operations. I know a lot of people think, oh, it smells and blah, blah, and it's dirty. Yeah. But everybody wants to talk about renewables as green and it's not dirty or anything like that. Anything waste is going to be dirty. And everybody drinks milk. I mean, we all need milk and we all should drink more milk. And it's just amazing when you walk through everything you're actually in it and you see it, how much care, how much money, how efficient they are, and how much they're driven just to stay in business. They're willing to pivot. They're willing to do anything they can to make their cows better. And they're all family ran.
Jason, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I would love to just hear high level, maybe not commodity specific or crop specific, where you see the future of agriculture going. Obviously, you have strong opinions about regen and water and energy and all this stuff. I'm curious, like looking 5-10 years out, what's the state of agriculture? What big changes are going to be made?
I think you'll see more row crops coming back into production a little bit. Maybe not the wheats and stuff like that, but maybe vegetables that if they have water, because they're taking out almonds or something like that. I think you'll see that. The other thing, I think the tide for farming is turning I think we have to go through these hard times right now with whether it be regulation, legislation, or whatever, to be able to wake people up, to be able to change their voting habits and see how things are really affecting their stores. And I think that tide is starting to change. And I think people in the state, whether they want to admit it or like they won't come out publicly and say it, but I think they're starting to see the bigger picture. And I think they're realizing I think they need to start backing off. And I think it'll start backing off in the future too. As long as you got people that are willing to fight and willing to educate, not just sit up there and yell and make havoc, but just talk about the true data and talk about and always being on offense. The problem with agriculture is that we've always been on defense. Never, ever have we always been on offense. As far as I can remember, I always look at agriculture. I'm like, why are we so far behind on the 8 ball on everything? I get it. We're all farming. We're all doing what we got to do to survive. But at the same time, I think everyone's got to step up and they got to push back a little bit because that's why we're in this position that we're in now. And it's not pushing back by yelling and screaming, but just going to meetings and talking about data and, and educating yourself on data and look, because it's all out there.
Totally. Well, it's been awesome to kind of follow your journey and everything that you're doing kind of on the advocacy side with energy, with policy, with water, everything you're sharing on LinkedIn. So keep up the good work. And as we wrap up here, how can listeners get in touch and connect with everything you're doing?
They can go to my Instagram page, which is Giannelli1, my Facebook, which is just my name, Jason Giannelli, or LinkedIn, which is Giannelli also.
So, Ty, what do you think?
I thought his comments about regenerative agriculture were really interesting. I think he is skeptical of some of it, and I think it's because a lot of people in the industry that are passionate about regenerative agriculture just think it's a one size fits all approach. A lot don't. A lot think that you use the right practices and principles for your context, but there's a lot of people that it's their way or the highway, right? And I think it's important to understand that farmers on the ground have different opinions about this, and you have to meet a farmer where they're at in terms of, making change on their farm. On our farm, Tim, we've had to iterate and try different things. Some things have worked, some things have not worked related to regenerative agriculture. And so I thought his comments, I think, were enlightening, and I hope they're enlightening for our listeners as well.
Totally. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed this conversation. We'll be back next week with another new episode.